Formula 1 returned this weekend to Belgium, and it felt like the grid was made using a random number generator, so we were on for an absolute stormer of a race, right? Well, kind of. It wasn't an absolute classic, but there's still a lot to talk about on the return from the summer break, so here are my 3 winners and 3 losers from the Belgian Grand Prix. And my first winner, well, what more can you say about Max Verstappen at this point? He was absolutely electric again. There were question marks as to whether Ferrari or Mercedes might be able to catch up to the Red Bull team over the summer break, but those questions were answered in emphatic style. The Dutchman took pole by 0.6 seconds on the Saturday, but would start the Grand Prix in 14th place, although just 12 laps into the Grand Prix, he took the lead for the first time. That's less laps than it is overtakes. And we had a safety car in there. Last year, I think it's fair to say that he was a little bit rough around the edges and had a few weekends where he would lose his cool. And don't get me wrong, there's still that temper there this season, but overall, he's been absolutely untouchable. On top of that, after this weekend, he has a 93-point lead and the championships are basically wrapped up. The largest gap that we've actually seen between first and second place in a Formula 1 championship was in 2013 when Sebastian Vettel won the championship by 155 points to Alonso. It might just be me, but I feel like Max Verstappen might be able to get quite close to that 155-point gap with 8 races left to go. Plus, a little side note, Christian Horner came out and thanked Toto Wolff for the new floor regulations. They are miles ahead in both championships, and yet he is still coming out and winding up the opposition. I just love Christian Horner. Talking of championships, our first loser has 7 of them. It has to be Lewis Hamilton. It is not the weekend that he would have wanted. Leading into the summer break from Canada through to Hungary, Lewis Hamilton was on an incredible run of podiums. He'd managed to get 5 in a row and looked to have a new spring in his step coming into the summer break. There was optimism that Mercedes would be able to improve over the summer break and a possibility that with other teams taking penalties, this would be their chance to take their first win in 2022. But the pace was just not there in qualifying, leading to Mercedes being the 4th fastest team and a long way off the Red Bulls and Ferraris. But as I said, with Verstappen and Leclerc taking penalties, there was still a little bit of hope that maybe the race pace of the Mercedes would be that little bit better. Cut to lap 1, turn 5, and Lewis Hamilton collides with Fernando Alonso, tries to continue, but the damage had already been done, and he had to take his first DNF of the season, and on top of that, that meant he lost pace to the rest of the top 6 who all picked up points. Although fair play to Lewis Hamilton, he came out, held his hands up, and he took responsibility for the crash without getting involved in the drama, even after what Fernando Alonso had to say on the collision. We can't discuss Alonso without moving on to our next winners, who may be having an absolute nightmare behind the scenes, but on the track, they turned up and were very impressive. It is, of course, Alpine stamping their authority on 4th place in the Constructors' Championship. When it came to qualifying, Alpine found themselves the 3rd fastest team on merit, leading to Alonso starting 3rd on the grid. Esteban Ocon, though, did take penalties and started 16th. Then on the Sunday, both drivers went on and put in exceptionally solid performances, and I think that's what's starting to separate Alpine from the rest of the midfield pack, is that consistency that they have and the great team dynamic they have with Esteban Ocon and Fernando Alonso. Well, at least on track. Both drivers are willing to work together and are constantly pushing each other to get the best out of themselves. Alonso saved what could have been a very tricky race after his collision, and Ocon put together some sublime overtakes throughout the Grand Prix. In particular, the double overtake to move up into 8th place was stunning. With Alonso picking up 5th after the checkered flag and Esteban Ocon coming home in 7th, it's another double points weekend for Alpine, and the pair are hunting down Lando Norris in the Drivers' Championship too. But our next loser is the man who split the Alpines. It is Charles Leclerc. He seems to find himself in the losers category quite often, but this weekend he definitely deserves to be in there. Although to be fair, you can blame Ferrari as well as usual. How Bonotto can come out after the summer break and argue that Ferrari have not made any mistakes this season is beyond me. The mistakes are literally every single weekend at this point. In qualifying, Charles Leclerc came out on the wrong set of tyres when giving Carlos Sainz a tow, which is not the end of the world, but again, it's not something that should happen at the top end of the pinnacle of motorsport. Then in the race, he started behind his title rival Max Verstappen, and whilst he was scything through the field, Charles Leclerc had to pit under the safety car because of some smoke coming from his front right tyre, which does seem to have been caused by a visor rip-off from Max Verstappen in front of him. But because he had to make that stop, it killed any chance of him keeping pace with his title rival. From that point onwards, it was damage limitations for Charles Leclerc, although Ferrari have come up with a new tactic to get around the strategy mistakes that they've had this season. Just let Charles Leclerc decide the strategy from inside the cockpit. He can't blame the team if he's making all the decisions himself. My only problem with that is, It's their job. Leclerc is there to drive the car, not to do strategic analysis throughout the entire race. He managed to battle his way up into 5th place whilst doing A-level maths in the cockpit, but then another driver error from the Monash man as he pitted for fresh tyres at the end, trying to nab fastest lap, but was caught speeding in the pit lane by 1 kilometre an hour. Leclerc said this was because of a sensor that blew up due to the overheating at the beginning of the Grand Prix, so Leclerc picked up a 5-second penalty for speeding, and didn't get the fastest lap, and dropped another 2 points. And Binotto said it wasn't an error. What a joke. Let's move on to our third and final winner though, which was our retiree himself, Sebastian Vettel. Even though he's leaving us at the end of the season, I feel like Sebastian Vettel is the personification of the saying, form is temporary, class is permanent, as he put on another great display picking up 8th place. Now, I don't think I hide it very well that I'm not a massive fan of the Aston Martin setup, but you have to hand it to them. When they get a shot at points, they usually take it and defend incredibly well. Even Stroll was in 11th again, just on the edge of points, and I genuinely think AlphaTauri and Haas might have to start looking over their shoulder in the Constructors' Championship. Another team faltering in the Constructors' Championship and leading on to our final loser. It could only be one man, and I hate to say it after he's had an incredibly tough end to the summer break, but Daniel Ricciardo was just nowhere near the pace. It's difficult to blame Daniel entirely, considering McLaren have literally just paid for him to leave the team at the end of the season. And it can't be the best place to be and have to start another 9 races. But to start in 7th place, although technically didn't make it out of Q2 again, and then finish the race in 15th behind his teammates, Tsunoda, Joe, just shows how awful it is for Daniel Ricciardo at McLaren at the moment. And again, highlights why the team just can't see a way to make it work in 2023. I genuinely hope that he is able to pick up a seat for next season, but it's a little bit of a gamble for whichever team picks him up. He looks completely devoid of confidence at the moment and clearly needs a team that can rejuvenate him and get him back to 2020 Daniel Ricciardo at least. A few honourable mentions from this weekend. Albon could have definitely been a winner, another points finish in the slowest car on the grid. Well, it's very quick in a straight line, but over the course of an actual Grand Prix, quite slow. Carlos Sainz also could have been classed as a winner, picking up another podium and looking pretty quick in that Ferrari. AlphaTauri almost had a dreadful weekend with both drivers starting from the pit lane, but Gasly actually picked up points, so they kind of sit in that middle ground. Although Haas could have definitely been a loser, another weekend where they were just absolutely nowhere, which isn't great if your last name is Schumacher. That rounds up my winners and losers from the Belgian Grand Prix. Leave a comment down below of your winners and losers from this weekend. Whilst you're down there, leave a like on the video, subscribe to the channel if you are new, and I will see you next time.
Ha! Amazing Sunday, guys. Car with some rocket ship all weekend. Unbelievable.
Max, you've been brilliant all weekend. Class of your own, mate.